All right, and welcome back to the Automation Insider. I'm Joe McGrath, once again, your host and systems development lead at Hy-Tek Intralogistics. This is the second part of a two-part series with my friend Drew Bailey, and we're talking about 3PLs. Drew, say hi again.
Hi again. I'm Drew Bailey. I am with Geodis, and I'm in business development. As I said previously, I'm a recovering engineer. Spent the first 15 years of my career in engineering, working with folks like Joe. And happy to talk to you today about 3PLs again.
All right, very cool. So last time we said, what is a 3PL? And we tried to get into some of the nitty-gritty about what a 3PL is, and it's a pretty big topic. This time I wanted to switch it up a little bit on you and say, when should you use a 3PL? So similar question, a lot of important differences there. So let's kind of dig into some of these. What are some of the challenges that companies that are like looking to dabble in 3PL usage would face? What are the big reasons?
So, there's textbook reasons such as, and they're value, they're true. There's value in these, but in terms of like, we want to focus on the brand and we want to be good at what we're good at, and we're not good at logistics, etc.
Stick to your knitting kind of thing.
Exactly. But then there's the real reasons that you see brands come in on a day-to-day basis and RFPs come in off the street. And those are things like typically, we're already outsourced and we're struggling with execution. And back to our conversation on our first podcast about when you have a bad 3PL, it can be a problem, in terms of it's not a commodity. Don't think of it like a commodity. So we see a lot of opportunities where an incumbent provider, it could be internal even, or competitor of ours, are struggling to execute. They're struggling with costs, etc. There's, someone who's maybe in-source, but they're at capacity with all the resources that we talked about. Maybe they have an engineer, but that engineer is at capacity and doesn't have the bandwidth to take on another site or something like that. It could be that they've been bought or spun out of an existing network that maybe they were supported by. They're no longer have access to things like that. So there's a variety of reasons, but I would say most of the time it's someone who's already outsourced that is looking for an improvement in service cost, etc., or someone who has a mix of insourcing and outsourcing and chooses to outsource for better leveraging fixed costs, professional services, etc.
Do you ever have anybody that maybe they have a supply chain already set up, that they want to expand into a new area? Like, hey, we've been on the East Coast for a while. I'd like to go to California, but I don't really want to go myself. Can you help me get into the market? Is that a use case?
It happens all the time. Yeah, and that kind of goes to the example of they might have the capacity for the capability to do it because they operate, say, on the East Coast, and they have the engineering expertise and the ops expertise and systems and so on and so forth. But they don't have the capacity to do it. Or maybe they don't understand the local market as well as they would like to in terms of real estate or labor, etc. So
a warehouse in Indiana is very different than a warehouse in LA.
To a certain extent, and especially from a cost perspective, definitely.
Yeah.
And so if you're looking to leverage fixed costs and get in with a 3PL who knows the market, knows the landlords in the market or the brokers,
the labor pool access,
the labor maybe already has existing space available that was taken under lease several years ago at a lower rate, things like that.
Right. And then what are some of the primary benefits that a customer is looking to just garner from a 3PL? And this is a little bit of a rehash from our previous conversation.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, we're asset-light professional services firm. We're just people backed by processes and systems and things like that. And so they're getting access to all of that talent when maybe they don't have it, or an example that I just provided a moment ago, they might have it or it's at capacity. Better leveraging fixed costs like we just talked about with space, or it could be other infrastructure, sharing of assets, IT and systems, licensing and development resources, and HR and safety, all the things, especially as it revolves around people. And the ability to, when you think about like the core kind of modules of like what a 3PL does is space, assets, labor, and training of labor, hiring of labor. We're experts in that. We do it a lot. Systems, and then processes, which, as I talked about previously, is kind of the table stakes, kind of where the margin lives, and the evolving of the operation after its life. And there's a lot of talent in 3PLs and in the industry, and places like Geodis that can be tapped and leveraged by someone who's looking to work with one.
Yeah. So in terms of the kind of customers, like we talked a little bit about expectations in the past, but I just wanted to try to dial in on like who are these people that should really think about using 3PL to win. But let's say I have like a very standard kind of just logistics process, right? I'm put it in a box, slap a label on it, put it on a UPS truck, versus someone that wants a bespoke process. Are those both like great use cases for the 3PL? Are they both the same type of 3PL that would service that? Like talk through that. Like, what are those different customers? Are those different? Do some customers have both types of supply chains like under one roof?
Yeah, definitely. You think about someone who operates in multiple channels. They might do the pallet unit of measure picking that you describe, or case unit of measure picking. That's very simple. Put a retailer label on it, shrink wrap the pallet, and load it on a truck. But they might also have pretty sophisticated split case picking for direct consumer or retail, etc. And so finding a 3PL that can do both and has expertise in both is harder. There's a lot of 3PLs that play in a very simple space, kind of public warehousing, pallet in, pallet out, etc. There's a lot less of them that play in the more complex, high throughput fulfillment space, and sometimes you have a need for both. Sometimes you only have a need for one. You mentioned the word bespoke or custom. There's also the space out there where the kind of the field of dreams, build it and they will come mentality, and this can apply to complex fulfillment as well. But I think they might build assets or a system and processes that are in place that they're looking to plug you into, and then there's more and more of these operations popping up. It's not our model. We believe in the unique nature of every brand and building custom tailored solutions to the brand's unique needs. But that's not for everybody. There's a lot of benefit that comes with that. There's some cons that come with it. Typically, you're not leveraging fixed costs as well, et cetera, but you get a custom experience. And so, there's a whole variety of 3PLs, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them that run the gamut on types of operations as well as types of product that they're handling and the complexity of it.
In general, if I'm thinking about like, should I outsource my supply chain? Is the simpler process one that's easier to outsource, or is this bespoke one like more valuable to outsource? Or does it not matter? Is it really just do I have the capacity or not?
Yeah, I don't think it matters all that much. When you get into outsourcing more complex fulfillment, there is more risk involved in terms of things like tribal knowledge that may exist that is more difficult to transfer, that's not obvious from data, that can make a very painful experience for both the brand and the 3PL. And that's obviously less impactful in a very simple operation that could be in a very complex one. But I think that in large part it doesn't matter all that much.
Yeah, but it's definitely a different type of 3PL, right?
Yes, definitely. There's out of the hundreds and hundreds that are out there, I learn in the new 3PL every day, and I feel like it's wild. But the vast majority of them would play in those simple public pallet in, pallet out, pallet in, case out type operation. That's simple retailer compliance type things, as opposed to more complex fulfillment that's split case or requires technology, high throughput, lots of retailer compliance requirements in terms of routing, labeling, pallet building, things like that. That there's a lot more risk to the brand in terms of, chargebacks from a retailer or consumer expectation as you're talking about service levels or the brand identity, things like that.
Like, how common is it for a 3PL to participate in like kitting or the light manufacturing side of it? So like almost into production. Is that fairly common? Is that like
pretty common? Yeah. And there are those who specialize in it and do fulfillment on the side, and there are those who specialize in fulfillment and kind of do that on the side.
We'll do a little kitting for you if you really want it.
Yeah. We have an entire group that focuses on light manufacturing. We call it PACs, or packaging and customization services, that we've been successful with to do everything from kitting to custom display building to even more true light manufacturing, like bagging of candies and things like that, and to sellable units, all sorts of different value-added activity.
Oh wow! So it can get pretty intense. But you ever like, it's fairly uncommon for them to go and kind of beyond that. Like there's not hardcore like manufacturing.
Yeah, maybe in some cases some very light assembly. Think like plug this into that, still like that. And we do some, this isn't light manufacturing. We'll do some more sophisticated value-added services, like think reverse logistics on, say, like PC hardware, for example. Like, the company may provide services where when someone leaves, you take their laptop or their phone and you clean it and reflash it and rebox it.
Kind of like a refurbishment sort of deal.
Get it available for the next employee. So you're doing all that value-added stuff, but then at the end of the day, you're stocking that SKU for fulfillment.
Yeah.
And so it's a value-added activity, but it's really a warehousing and fulfillment opportunity.
Interesting. Yeah. Very interesting. Right. And then I just want to make sure I jump back to it, but you talk about this like field of dreams idea. And I've seen this a couple of times, but essentially a 3PL will go ahead and say, hey, let's put in a bunch of technology. Let's put in a whole bunch of locations, right? And then we will just hope to attract somebody that wants to be in that space. Is that kind of the general idea of these sites?
Yes, very, very much. That's the idea.
And so what are the type of customers that like they're hoping to put into the kind of established asset set?
Yeah. I think most of them that you'll see in these operations are small emerging brands, maybe medium-sized brands that want access to technology but can't justify it themselves. They don't have the volume to justify it themselves. And so back to the leveraging fixed cost idea, you can put 10 small brands into a piece of technology and get the scale that you need that might be a medium or large size brand would get themselves in order to justify it and make it work. But there's also, I think, maybe an idea out there that from even larger brands that 3PLs might be sitting on assets and available capacity, space, equipment, systems, automation, et cetera, that can service a larger brand. And generally speaking, I'm not aware of any provider who's actually doing that. The economics just don't make sense.
Just hold on to a couple million square feet
exactly.
In Chicago's.
Yeah, with some sort of goods person in it or whatever. So obviously no one's going to have that much excess capacity to put a medium or large brand in just on a whim, right?
But combining several, like the throughput of several small ones, that's a fairly reasonable ask.
Yeah.
What about like doing that like kind of temporally? So like just absorbing some volume for like a peak, or hey, can you do this for 6 months while I reconfigure my existing building? Do those type of like 3PL opportunities exist? Is that or is that not super desirable for anybody involved?
Yeah, no, not really. Yeah, there's some pop-up activity that happens, usually not technology focused. It's usually pretty manual.
And just get some square footage to throw my stuff in.
Exactly. And they'll do fulfillment activity, even like split case, direct consumer fulfillment, for example, but very, very simple, processes and very short term in nature, obviously. But it's not very common that's happening. And you got to think about things like the IT integration effort to make something like that happen. It's often just not worth it.
So what's the kind of typical like time frame? Like if someone's thinking about doing this, like how long should you kind of commit for? What should be in your head?
Working with a 3PL in general?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so let's say on average the opportunities are about 3 years in terms of contract duration. Those it's ebbed and flowed over time. Back to like the fully transactional build it, know will come model. Sometimes there's no commitment at all.
Mm-hmm.
And month to month, for example. And then, like during COVID, when real estate supply was very low and the landlords were requiring 7 to 10 year commitments on space because they could, then the 3PL contracts also got quite a bit longer because typically the especially on larger deals, the space and assets are usually coterminous with the contract with the brand is coterminous with, say, our lease commitment to.
Oh, interesting. So is that like lease like negotiation and the customer negotiation all kind of part of a single collaboration? Or is like you guys do that behind the curtain over here?
Yeah, just behind the curtain usually. There are exceptions to everything I'm saying, but typically that would be something that the 3PL would do directly with the landlord to secure the available space required for a particular opportunity. And whatever terms we're able to get in terms of cost and lease duration and investments by the landlord, et cetera, we would roll up into a full-blown commercial package back to the customer that says, hey, you need to sign up for a 5-year commitment at X cost and so on, that ultimately negotiated behind the curtain.
Interesting. I assume that sometimes this also happens, but what if the customer owns the assets? They just want you to operate their assets for them. Is this a fairly common arrangement, or is this kind of a exotic?
No, that happens. I wouldn't say it's fairly common, but it does happen. We would call that a labor play, or sometimes labor and systems. Sometimes they would take the space and the assets, and we would come in with our labor and professional services and ops leadership and so on, and put the systems, our WMS in, or our commercial WMS. But we see a handful of those opportunities every year where maybe a big brand that ultimately wants to do it themselves someday, and so they would prefer to go ahead and take the space and the assets down so it's easy for them to take it over someday, but they're just not prepared to do it at the moment, and so they prefer to outsource the labor and other aspects to 3PL. There's also the option, if and this happens a fair bit with even technology, for example, if we were to put automation in, where they would have the option to take it over at a later time, and so they would have assignment rights on the lease of the space. Whatever financial way that we've financed the assets would ultimately be transferable to them, the WMS, et cetera. So there's various types of ways to structure the deal just based on their long-term ambitions, but labor plays are generally because they want to at some point do it themselves.
So like, and we do this like a little bit with like hard maintenance. Like when we turn on a new system, we're going to teach you how to use it for a while. Like we can help you maintain this forever.
Yeah. Right.
But if you want to learn how to do it, we're more than happy. Is that sort of how the relationship feels when you're doing a labor play? Like, hey, we'll get you there. We'll help you design it, and then you get the training wheels off someday.
Yeah, to a certain extent. Back to the first episode, and the execution at scale, or the execution engine concept, is really what we are. We design, build, and eventually operate, and sometimes into perpetuity for many, many years, decades even, with some clients, or sometimes they just need us for 3 years.
We off the ground kind of deal.
Exactly. We don't have the capacity to do it right now, but we're going to do it at some point, and we need your execution engine at the moment. We design the systems and document all the processes, and set all the framework for execution rights on assets and lease and systems and all of that up where it's easily transferable to them when the time comes.
Interesting. Is the relationship of the way that you guys design and decide to operate those buildings different for opportunities with like a short term like kind of contract versus like a longer one? Like if it's a 2-year, partnership, are you going to make really different decisions than if it's a 15-year partnership?
Yeah, definitely.
What kind of dive into some of these?
Technology is the most obvious one. Before I go there, even just simple things like, commercially, when we commit to an opportunity, we might make investments. All the professional services that I've talked a lot about in terms of engineering and project management and so forth, those people don't work for free. So obviously we have to pay them. In some commercial models, we would pass those professional services on to the customer, and some we would invest in those. And so, on a
free engineering is what I've heard myself be called a lot of times. Yeah,
exactly. We could talk some about that in terms of all the free engineering we've done in RFP responses over the years. But I think the point being that in some cases, if we're talking about a 2 or 3 year arrangement, we can't invest in all of those professional services because there's just not enough time to recoup and get a financial return on it.
Your return on investment is typically, it needs to be within that contract period, right? Because after that, it doesn't make any sense, right? So a lot of your decisions are really lensed around this time period. Like, how long do we have to do the best job we can?
Yeah, generally speaking, there's a lot of school of thought on this, especially as it relates to assets and overhang on term. I've mentioned the coterminous idea earlier. This could be a whole conversation in and of itself. But there is some appetite in the market to amortize assets to the customer on a shorter term than we're depreciating them on, for example. Based on their useful life. The useful life is, say, 10 years or so, and the deal's only 5 years, then we amortize 5 years of depreciation on it. We take the overhang, and there's risk associated to that on the back end. There are those that do that, balloon payment structures, all kinds of things like that. But generally, it's as obvious as it may sound, the longer the term, the more investment we can make in terms of the professional services, but especially technology. And so when you see 3PLs using significant amounts of technology, tens of millions of dollars, generally that's going to be associated to longer term commitments from the client or creative structures that allow the risk to be tolerable or shared amongst the parties if they were to exit after some period of time.
Interesting. It's like is redeployable equipment typically a thing that gets discussed a lot, or is it mostly just we'll handle this through financing and the equipment is what it is at the end of whatever the term?
Yeah. The idea of transferability is becoming more and more prevalent because, especially with the onset of robotic-based technology.
Yeah, so this technology you could do that with a T-Sword, let's say.
Yeah, and it's not fixed infrastructure bolted to the floor like we're used to from years past. So it's easier to create up and send it down the street if we've got a new opportunity.
Reconfigure it a little bit.
Or reconfigure, add to it, take it away. Maybe we don't have to completely decommission it, but we only need half the capacity. We send the other half somewhere else.
Yeah.
So all that sounds good in principle. In reality, I'm not aware of very many that have executed on it yet, but in theory, that opportunity does exist, and it's becoming more and more of a conversation for sure.
Interesting. I assume that different levels of conservatism at different 3PLs have different outcomes there.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And you see that in the financial results a little bit. Publicly traded 3PLs that might take that kind of mindset. They're going to invest a lot in assets that don't have immediate financial return in terms of earnings. And so when you look at EBITDA, it looks pretty good. When you look at their operating income or their EBIT, not so good. You're talking about 2 to 3%, for example.
Yep.
That some publicly traded 3PLs would be reporting because they're making some decisions like that and taking that long-term risk and deploying their capital or using their capital for those purposes.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. All right. couple more questions we got from the audience. So thank you again, everybody that sent us the questions on LinkedIn. Trying to get through some more of these here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what are the main challenges in finding like the right 3PL. And this is obviously a super loaded question for you, but I'm out here looking for 3PL. Like, what are the top 3 things I need to keep in the back of my head to make sure I have the right kind of partner?
Yeah. I think first, as I said, execution is king. So you need to believe in the execution capability of the partner. And I think some maybe obvious things just about working with business partners in general, but you don't want someone who's going to say yes to everything. We've had those partners and integration partners that say yes to everything, and those touch partners are scary because
can you do that?
At the end of the day, it's actually healthier to say no sometimes, and so you don't want that type of partner. And then I think just the as cliche as it sounds, but the partnership mindset, not the vendor mindset or the commodity mindset that we talked about earlier, but just the willingness to share information, to be invested in outcomes, to show grace when there are mistakes, because there will be mistakes. Finding someone who's going to show up well, and when the mistakes happen, I think is a big indicator of a good partner. I think I pride ourselves in that. We make mistakes, but and we'll show up to make it right, and throw a lot of resources into it. I've been that resource many times. That's on the plane, making it right.
It's Christmas Eve, you're throwing boxes.
Yeah, exactly. I've seen some very expensive tote stacking machines with, vice presidents and above out, stacking hospital totes and things like that. But if that's what it takes to make it right, in the short term, that's what you should expect from the right partner.
How do you audit for that?
Audit as a
if I'm a like, yeah, how do I know that they do that?
That's a good question. I think some obvious answers would be it's a small industry, and so I think your reputation generally precedes you, but also just referrals. Maybe
I'll go in there.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's pretty common when you're making big purchasing decisions like that. I'm sure you guys experience a lot. They want a referral for from somebody that you performed for before. So
yeah, it is a pretty big part of our business. Show me where you've done this.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, a lot of it does come down to some element of trust, and are they credible? Do you believe what they're telling you? Are they saying yes to everything, or are they telling me the things that might be hard for me to hear, but are good for me, and all things that I'm sure you and your audience are very familiar with. I think it's general business practice.
All right. Very cool. All right. And then where, this is another question from online, but where does collaboration kind of come into play? That's how the question was worded. Like, what does it kind of look like? There's a lot of people involved in a 3PL deal, right? There's somebody that owns the property. There's someone that's may or may not put in technology. There's people that are going to engineer the technology. Like, what do those relationships look like? How deep do they go?
With it, I think that's one of the key pieces of value that we provide is we have deep relationships in all of those areas already. And so we're in some cases bringing the client into those relationships and those conversations. In most cases, I would say we're not, at their request or by their choice. They really don't want to get involved.
I don't know how the sausage is made kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly. But I think the outcome is generally better the more they will get involved.
Yeah.
But that's the exception and not the rule. Usually, the relationships would be the 3PL with our providers or partners, landlords, integrators, WMS providers, so on and so forth. And there are a lot of them. The relationships are deep, and they're internal relationships as well, just like in any organization. But the ability for engineering to work with IT and IT with ops and ops with HR and everybody with safety. So the collection of people that I've talked about that ultimately is who we are. The ability to get things done and execute at a high level really comes down to that culture and the ability to work across cross-departmentally.
kind of cross-functionally, a lot of open communication.
Exactly.
Very cool. All right, and then like one last question. This one's kind of a softball for you.
Okay.
Yeah, like who does the returns and reverse logistics? Right. This is super easy.
Who does the returns? They're pure play returns providers. You mean like processing of returns, like refurbishment?
And there's pure play return providers.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah. There are quite a few. One of them actually was just acquired by one of our big competitors not long ago. So they would do like processing of the actual processing return, the booking of it, the inspection, the crediting of the refund, things like that.
That's like the hardest part of the facility to bite off too. Returns are always like,
it's a mess. Yeah.
Like you cringe a little bit. It's like, we wouldn't do this.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that, in that case, they would maybe send the refurbed return to us to restock. But it varies. In other cases, we would 3PL would offer that service as well.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I always like it when I get an answer I don't expect. Good stuff. Perfect. All right. Well, Drew, thank you very much for sitting down with me and talking. I learned a lot. I'm very grateful for having you on the show. I think it was excellent. And this is the second podcast we've done with Drew. The first part, if you've missed it, please go check it out anywhere you download podcasts, which is where you can find this one, anywhere you download podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or the Hy-Tek Intralogistics website. We have all of our material uploaded there, and we'd love to have you follow along. Thanks.